Hello, this is Rico Cavella, and this is your Fearless Aging podcast, where in every episode, my guests and we strive to offer you proven tips and strategies that you can implement immediately to greatly improve your overall health and well-being. And so you can live a much more successful, fulfilling, joyful, long life and to never be old. So we're here to inspire you and empower you to become your best self so you can go out in the world and make a bigger positive change. And don't we need more people to do that these days? So before I introduce our topic today, which I'm really excited about, and our expert guest, I want to ask you a question. If you've been wondering how well you are aging, well, we've got the solution for you. We have a new How Well Are You Aging quiz on our main website, agelesslivinglifestyle.com. So it's a free quiz. You can go there and find out how well you are aging. And if you're not doing as well as you want to, well, I have the solution for that as well. So I'll offer you a free coaching session where you can discuss whatever's going on, whatever challenges you're having mentally, physically, nutritionally, fitness-wise, whatever, and we'll get you going on the right track. So go to agelesslivinglifestyle.com. You can take the quiz and you can sign up for a free coaching session. So the title of today's episode is called SpellBound. It's the title of a new book. And it's about how to break the spell of your subconscious mind and create your life consciously. And it's really about modern science and ancient magic and the hidden potential of the unconscious mind. And our guest and the author of SpellBound is Dr. Daniel Lieberman, MD. He's a professor of psychiatry and behavioral science at George Washington University and the co-author of The Molecule of More, how a single chemical in your brain drives love, sex, and creativity and will determine the fate of the human race. That's a pretty big statement, but I got to ask him about that. And Dr. Lieberman is a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association, a recipient of the Caron Foundation Research Award, and has published more than 50 scientific reports in the areas of brain science and human behavior. So Dr. Daniel Lieberman, welcome to the Fearless Aging podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, before we get going, I have to ask you about, the single chemical in your brain. Would that be serotonin or dopamine?
It's dopamine. You got it. That's right.
All right. Okay, good. That is right. And I think you're right. That does determine the fate, right?
It's a powerful, dangerous chemical. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have to say again, I really want to congratulate you on the great work of your book, SpellBound. I found it really fascinating the way you weave in all the different analogies and different stories and things from the past and the future of science. So I have to ask you, it's so well written too. How long did it take you to write this book?
It took me about 4 years.
Yeah, I was going to say that's quite and all this. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. So
I thought I knew about this subject, but I spent 1 full year just researching it and reading up and filling in the blanks in my knowledge base.
Yeah, I've written a few books. Isn't the best thing about writing a book is that you find out what you know and what you don't know, and you learn a lot. Don't you learn a lot by writing a book?
So much. And stuff I thought I knew, when I tried to explain it, I realized I didn't know it. Yeah. There's nothing better than trying to explain something to someone else to realize the deficiencies in your own knowledge.
Yeah, really good. I want to read before we get going on it. Because I think this sums it up really good. One of your testimonies in your book, it says, Dr. Lieberman beautifully weaves together stories from literature, philosophy, spirituality, mythology, and history with neuroscience and Jungian. How do you say?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Jungian and Freudian psychology, using clear, jargon-free language. He helps us understand how integrating the magical, mysterious, and metaphorical language of the unconscious with our rational, orderly, and logical conscious minds can help us to develop our true selves. I think that's exactly what I found in that. So first of all, tell me what is the main concept that you want to get over to people when they read your book?
I wanted to help people appreciate just how important their unconscious mind is. This is our fellow traveler through life, and we tend to ignore it. I don't think we fully appreciate the enormous role it plays in our life. Jung said that if you don't appreciate your unconscious, it acts like a kind of fate. It will determine the course of your life without you realizing it. The unconscious is responsible for much of what's best in us and much of what's worst in us. And if we can join with it, if we can partner up with it in a productive relationship, it can bring so many wonderful things to our lives.
Well, give us I don't know if it's really possible to just sum up in a couple of sentences, but how would you describe what is the subconscious? I mean, I think most people know we have a conscious mind and the subconscious or unconscious mind. How would you describe the unconscious mind?
Yeah, well, I think that one way to describe it is that it is everything your brain does that you do not have control over. Now, some of this is very basic physiologic stuff, like determining how fast your heart beats or secreting hormones into your bloodstream. If we go up a little bit in terms of sophistication, we get urges, we get emotions, and we get desires. And if you think about it, these are the things that really determine the quality of our life. Our emotions, whether we're happy, sad, angry, irritable, compassionate, gentle, has an enormous effect on how we feel. And then also our desires. We spend our lives pursuing the things that we want, whether it's a career, love, prestige, family. But I think we need to ask ourselves, who determines what it is that we want? We don't get to choose it. And in many situations, what we find is that the things that we desire are things that perhaps are not so good for us. We may fall in love with someone who is just terrible for us. We may want to pursue a career that we have absolutely no chance of being successful in. These can be very frustrating. We have to recognize they're out of our control. They're chosen by our unconscious mind, and we need to know how to work with that entity.
Well, let me ask you, well, how does that occur? I mean, how does that happen? How does the unconscious mind all of a sudden decide all these things for us? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. So, I like to think of the unconscious mind. Human beings are animals, but we are strange animals. We're animals who are capable of rational thought. And that is why human beings have sort of risen above our natural origins. And we're able to do mathematics. We're able to discover the laws of physics. We're able to think about abstract concepts like beauty and justice and truth. These are things that our rational mind gives us. Very powerful, very important. But we still are animals. And if we want to live full, complete, satisfying lives, we've got to also appreciate the animal side of who we are. And that is our instinct. And rationality allows us to approach life in a logical way. But what instinct does is it gives us the energy, the passion to pursue it. And it also gives us the experiences in life that are the richest. Figuring out how to put together a spreadsheet may be very powerful, right?
Yeah.
It could get us a promotion at work. It could increase our bank account, but it's not going to give a lot of meaning to our lives. Meaning comes from the animal side of who we are. And so we shouldn't look down on it. We need to appreciate that it can be very, very sophisticated in many ways.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting because as we were talking earlier before we came on, I've always heard, and maybe most people had the same experience, that our subconscious, our unconscious mind was just programmed by our experiences and what people told us and what our feelings and thoughts, and then they just played them back, and we weren't even aware that was what was producing the actions that we're taking. But it's much more. It's actually it's in our DNA, I guess, all those instincts and all those, like I say, urges and things.
Yeah, it's in our DNA. But, one of the things the unconscious does is it does pay attention to things that the conscious mind doesn't see. Consciousness, in some ways, conscious attention is like a spotlight, right? So I'm focusing on our conversation. There's all kinds of other things going on around me that I'm not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
The conscious mind can only focus on one thing at a time. And to give you an example of that, if you're reading a sentence in a book, you can't plan on what you're making for dinner at the same time.
Yeah.
The unconscious mind is different. It has about 500,000 times more processing power than consciousness because it runs things in parallel. And so it's not just a spotlight focusing on one thing at once. It's taking in everything. And it doesn't just record it passively. It processes that information, often in very sophisticated ways. And sometimes it will give that back to us in the form of intuitions, gut feelings, and inspirations. And anybody who's ever called the unconscious mind primitive has never had an inspiration that changed their life. It is the opposite of primitive. It represents incredibly sophisticated thinking, but it's a different kind of thinking.
Well, that's so fascinating because I don't think, I mean, I wasn't aware of all this. I don't think too many people really were aware of what's going on and what our unconscious mind, because I've always, again, heard that the unconscious mind it doesn't judge things. It doesn't create things. It just plays things back. That's what I've always heard.
Well, let me give you an example. When you were young, you visited a lot of colleges to try to decide where you were going to go.
Okay.
And you were absolutely overwhelmed with data. How good are the professors? How good is the reputation? What's the food like? What's the dormitory like? What's the gym, the library like? How about the location? There's a million things. The conscious mind is simply not capable of processing that many things. But probably at one point during your search, you got a gut feeling that one school was the right school for you. And something similar happens when we ask ourselves the question, should I be friends with this person? Should I date this person? Should I marry this person? There are too many factors at play for us to be able to use raw logic and reason to answer that. And so we need to rely on our gut feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just an example of the unconscious mind performing cognitive processing that's beyond the capabilities of rationality.
So that's just like intuition. That's where intuition, and so in some ways, from the spiritual standpoint, it's like connecting with our higher self because like our higher self knows really what's best for us and what we should be doing. So actually, you might say the unconscious mind or subconscious mind is actually it's really our higher self.
Absolutely. But if I could just do a but,
Okay.
the unconscious mind is the natural part of human beings. And nature is amoral. It's not immoral. It just doesn't have morality. And so when a tiger kills somebody, we don't say, "Oh, that tiger was evil." No, it was just following its instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Nature can be incredibly powerfully good. Rain fertilizes the soil, and sunsets are beautiful. Nature can also be incredibly bad. Storms will destroy towns and things like that. The unconscious mind, being a part of nature, is the same. It is
Mm.
responsible for the best in us, but it's also responsible for the worst in us.
Ah.
Hatred, prejudice. These are not things that we choose to experience. These are things that overwhelm us. Rage, murder, all of these kinds of things also come from the unconscious mind.
So are you saying the things you just mentioned, those aren't something that we learned? It's something that's innately in us.
Yeah, that's right.
It
That's right.
is.
Now,
Wow.
now, now, learning is going to modify those innate things,
Mhm.
but we start out with that package, and we have to learn how to manage that beast that is within us, that is capable of being godlike in its good effects, but also diabolical in its bad effects.
Wow. Well, tell us a little bit about. Well, I think you already have, but one of the titles of one of the like chapters is about the unconscious and the supernatural. How that's connected.
Yeah. So, we've talked a little bit about how the unconscious is connected to the animal side of human nature.
Mm-hmm.
The animal side, oddly enough, is very connected to the divine. If you look at pagan gods and goddesses, in many situations, they're half human, half animal.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're fully animal. If you look at other supernatural traditions, we see the same things. So, for example, in fairy tales, the powerful creatures that often help the hero or heroine out of impossible situations is often a talking animal, talking fox, talking dog, talking bird, something like that. And so the unconscious spans both sides of humanity. Our conscious mind is sort of in the middle. The unconscious is the animal side of us, and it is also the divine side of us. Now, one of the things that the human brain does is it projects unconscious contents onto its environment. For example, imagine looking at a sunset and how that might make you feel. Let me just paint a picture. It's sunset. You're at the beach. You see the sun setting into the waves, the reds, the goldens, the grays, the blues. You hear the surf. Imagine how that makes you feel. Now, that feeling is not coming from the photons the sun is giving off. It's not coming from the vibrations in the air the surf is coming off. That feeling is coming from your unconscious mind and is being projected onto the photons and the air vibrations. When we project the unconscious mind, it often gets projected as a supernatural power because it's amoral. It's so different from humanity and it's so much powerful than our consciousness. And so we can understand our unconscious through neuroscience, through psychological studies. But in my opinion, the best, most sophisticated way to understand it is by looking at these supernatural traditions, because they have been around for thousands of years. They've been refined by millions of people over millennia. And they have become this highly distilled, highly potent way of understanding the projections of the unconscious.
So really, supernatural just means an occurrence that we can't explain logically, right?
Well, when I think of the natural world, I think of the materialist understanding of the world,
Right.
right? Everything is atoms and molecules and photons and other physical energy. Supernatural is anything outside of that, anything that's outside the materialist model. Now, from a scientific point of view, does the supernatural exist? We don't know. Science has no way of measuring anything outside of the materialist world. And
Mm-hmm.
so science is simply silent on that matter. It does not deny the existence of the supernatural, but nor does it say it has evidence of its existence. Psychology, though, is different. Psychology is not about what we can measure with scientific tools. It's about what we experience subjectively, our
Mm.
internal world. And our psychology very much feels as if there are things beyond the material world. Our soul, our spirit, who we are, we don't feel like a robot. We don't feel like a machine that's nothing more than atoms bumping into one another. We feel like there's this kind of ethereal spirit that is the essence of who we are. So the psychological experience of the supernatural would be anything beyond atoms and molecules. And so
Mm-hmm.
that would include gods, goddesses, spirits, demons, souls, that kinds of thing.
Wow. What just occurred to me is it's kind of funny. What we call the conscious mind, it's really not very conscious because it's not really conscious of all these other things that are going on, right?
Yes, but one of the wonderful things about consciousness is that it can be expanded.
Yeah.
The unconscious changes very slowly. For example, let's say that you wanted to learn how to throw a baseball pitch. Um, in order to do that, you could read in a book what you do. Yeah, you draw your arm back, you put your weight on your back foot. I don't know, all these things. But in order to really do it, you'd have to practice 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
The unconscious, which is responsible for muscle coordination, learns very slowly through experience. But the wonderful thing about the conscious mind is it's incredibly flexible. It's incredibly fast. Consciousness can change, can learn, can grow by listening to a podcast like this. Mm-hmm. So, I like to talk about how wonderful the unconscious is, but I don't want to minimize how wonderful consciousness is as well. And I think part of the purpose of life is to expand our consciousness as much as possible to become aware of things that we didn't know existed.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of, there's quite a bit. Well, because our conscious mind is pretty much stuck in the 3 or 4 dimensions that we're in now. But, like quantum physics means multidimensional. There's so many other dimensions that we're not consciously aware of, right?
One of the amazing things about the unconscious is that it does seem to exist outside of time. Wow. For example, we've all had the experience of suddenly having a memory from childhood erupt into our brains. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, we're back there. It's as if we've gone back 50 years in time and we're in our old classroom, our old playground, our old bedroom. If we tried to consciously remember that, it would be all fuzzy and hazy. But the unconscious memory interrupts, all the details are there. The sights, the smells, the sounds. The unconscious is independent of time.
Why do you think that happens?
I think that our unconscious mind usually kind of stays in the background. And that's why we're not so aware of it. That's why we don't appreciate it as much as I think we should. But sometimes, and it can happen for various reasons, it gets really active and we get these eruptions into consciousness. Sometimes the eruptions are terrible when we're overcome with rage and we say things that we regret. We hurt people that we love. Maybe we smash prized possessions. Sometimes it erupts in very positive ways. And these can be these wonderful memories of childhood. It can be an inspiration that changes our life, maybe changes the world, as happens when sometimes scientists or artists are inspired. Mm-hmm. We can stir up the unconscious mind to make these eruptions more likely to happen, but we need to be very careful because of the power of the unconscious mind. We need to make sure we're ready to handle the eruptions.
Well, so how do we do that? How can you know that you're ready? I don't know.
How do we do that? How do we get ready for it?
Yeah.
I think that the way to do it is to learn conscious discipline, to learn to be able to make choices and then act based on those choices. And it's not an easy thing to do. We form intentions and we don't always follow through on those intentions.
Yeah.
But we can get better at it. And that's one of the wonderful things that happens as we age. Psychologists, Jung included, they call the conscious mind the ego. Sometimes ego can have negative connotations like being self-centered or narcissistic, but in psychology, it's very neutral. It's just the Latin word for I. Mm-hmm. One of the wonderful things as we age is that our ego does become stronger. We're better able to deliberate, make decisions, and then act on those decisions. We're better able to take the things that come from our unconscious mind, like emotions, and decide if we're going to act on them or not. Maybe something is irritating us. Maybe something is making us angry. If we have good ego strength, we don't have to necessarily act in an angry way.
Yeah.
We feel the anger without being angry. We feel pride without being proud. That's one of the wonderful things about ego strength, allowing us to fully experience the eruptions that come from the unconscious mind without allowing them to take over our behavior.
Well, I think that's one of the qualities of becoming enlightened, isn't it? You're not letting external circumstances and people affect our peace and our joy.
Yeah, one of the things I wrote about was this idea of transcendence. Transcendence sounds like this amazing mystical property, but in fact, transcendent qualities are things that naturally grow in many people, not everybody, but in many people as they age. And one of the transcendent qualities is really looking inside oneself for gratification and satisfaction rather than looking at material things. So instead of getting a new car, we might simply enjoy the emotional experiences we have being with people that we love.
Absolutely. So how's the unconscious connected to that, to transcendence?
Yeah. So really what transcendence is about is gaining this peacefulness within oneself, understanding that that's where true satisfaction and fulfillment comes from. We don't care as much what other people think about ourselves, think about us.
Yeah.
Material possessions don't mean as much. We accept ourselves for who we are, in spite of our faults. We work on making our faults better, but we don't stress so much about that. And the role that the unconscious plays is the conscious mind and the unconscious mind develop this friendly relationship. And that's what allows us to develop this inner strength of confidence, of acceptance, of fulfillment, and satisfaction. Prior to developing transcendence, when we're younger, we get bursts of that. And let me give you an example of that. We have this saying, "Oh my God, that was a magic moment." A magic moment might come at the beach at sunset. It might come spending time with somebody that we love. It might come at the top of a mountain. That's when the veil of the ordinary is ripped away and we see the world with clear eyes. And we see that the world is a magic place that is so much richer than we thought it was. The goal of transcendence, and I think the goal of successful aging, is to be able to little by little get through the veil of the ordinary and see the magic in the world every day. And in order to do that, we've got to open up the channels of communication with our unconscious mind, which is where the magic comes from.
Wow, that's well said. Yeah, well, that's definitely a component of spirituality, is becoming self-realized of who we really are. We're really much more than just this human body. We're actually some eternal spiritual being, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, when the consciousness acts alone without unconscious, we're not who we really are.
Yeah.
We're just an act. For example, I'm a psychiatrist. And when I'm at work, I put on my psychiatrist mask. I don't let all of my true self come out. I play a role. And that's how it is when we're purely conscious without the role of the unconscious. We're just playing a role, and we're like everybody else in the world playing the same role. Now, if we're purely unconscious, it's the same thing. We're not an individual. We're not our true self. We're just our passions, our emotions, the animal side of ourselves. The only way that we can become an individual is by merging those two things. That's when our true self comes out, the self that is unlike anybody else in the world.
Wow. Well, before I ask you the question of how best to begin to merge those two together, I want to ask you a couple more things. You talk about spirits a lot, how spirits are everywhere. Talk a little bit about spirits and uh, well, how that affects both our conscious and our subconscious mind.
Yeah, right. So I don't know how hard this will be for you to believe, but evolutionarily, our brains developed to see the world in a mystical, magical way. And one way to understand that is the way that we tend to personify everyday objects. Think about your favorite sweatshirt or your favorite pair of pants. You might like it because it's comfortable, but you probably also like it because you've actually developed a social relationship with it.
Get attached to it.
You get attached to it. Yeah. It's almost as if it's a person. Some of us may have, for example, a quilt. that was knitted by our grandmother.
Yeah.
We may feel that there is an echo of her spirit within that quilt. If somebody said, hey, give me that quilt, I'm going to give you a newer one that is so much better. It's prettier, it's warmer, whatever. I would say, oh my God, no, you've got to be crazy. Even if the quilt was worn out and scraggly, and we wouldn't give it up because of the echo of our grandmother's spirit in that quilt. Now, look,
it is.
As a scientist, there's no echo of grandmother in that spirit, but that's what our brains do. Our brains naturally apply spirit to matter. As modern people, we often fight against that. We say, oh, that's not really true. I need to see the world from a scientific perspective. And I think that's a mistake, because I think it's a very bad idea to fight against your own biology. If you're constantly at war with yourself, you're never going to achieve your true potential.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you allow yourself to experience the world in this magical way, your life becomes richer and you become more effective interacting with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
And if I could go on a little bit more about that, let's take superstition. If you were to ask most people, are you superstitious? They might deny it, or if they admit it, they might do it in a somewhat uncomfortable way. But being superstitious actually gives us an advantage. And here's why. Students before an exam, the vast majority of them in one study that was done engaged in superstitious rituals. Maybe they wore a lucky shirt. Maybe they used their lucky pen. Maybe they sang the school song before going in for their exam. These things actually boost their performance on the exam. Athletes are more superstitious than most people. Mm-hmm. Professional athletes are more superstitious than amateurs. And elite athletes, people like Michael Jordan, they are the most superstitious of all. And there's a reason for that, because
it's because if you believe something, if you really believe that it's going to help you, then it does.
That's right. That's right. Michael Jordan was an outstanding basketball player. But he didn't have a great game every time he got out on the court. That was outside of his control. If he was going to deliver an inspired performance, that had to come from his unconscious. And by engaging in superstitious rituals, he actually did something with neuroscientific justification. It activated aspects of his brain responsible for the unconscious and made it more likely he would have a successful game.
Yeah, I've heard him say that. He used to look for ways to get inspired, like what some of the players said about him, or he'd always look for some way to get hyped up to say, "Oh, I'm gonna prove it. I'm gonna show these people." Yeah,
he knew that he was in a partnership with an entity inside of him that he did not have direct control over. And so he used indirect with getting himself hyped up and engaging in lucky superstitious rituals.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah. Well, also, I just want to say, back on that thing about the quilt that your grandmother made. I believe, I mean, there is some, because everything's vibration in the universe, right? And so everything is vibrating, even our thoughts and our words and everything. So the vibration that your grandmother and the love she put into doing that thing, it's still there, and we can feel that. I think that's true.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that is a completely legitimate way of looking at it. But I also find it very exciting that we can explain these phenomenon through materialist science alone without the need to go for superstition.
Yeah.
And the conclusion it leads us to is that it is good to understand the world in a magical way. That's where the science points us. And to me, I find that mind-blowing.
Yeah, me too. And what I'm really exciting me all the time. How quantum physics and science is actually proving a lot of ancient spirituality concepts of spiritual, who we are, what's now science is. So I think we're merging into a thing of science spirituality. It's where we're getting our information. They're coming together. Well, just like you talked about in atomism, the early ancients, I mean, they believed in that even a rock or something had some vibration, it had something to honor or to respect or to get something from. And so we've learned that's now that actually is true.
And yeah, ancients would do it with rocks and trees. Modern people do it with cars and computers, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How many people sort of talk to their car? I had this car. Oh my God, it often wouldn't start, and I would berate her in the key, and I would say, "Please,
Yeah.
please start today."
Yeah.
And that's just how our brains work.
I do that with my computer. If it starts to freeze up or something, I'm going, come on, you stop. Do it. That's true. We do that. It's funny.
We do,
Yeah.
and we want to kick the copy machine. And if you say, "Why did you want to kick that copy machine?" She would
Yeah.
say, "Oh, it's just it's nothing really. I don't really believe that the copy machine has a spirit." But it's funny that we act as if we do. That's
Yeah.
how our brains evolved, and we cannot escape it. And it's really best to embrace it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. I really I like that. Okay, a couple more things here before I ask you some things of what we how we some things that we can do to balance our subconscious and our conscious and like say become more than we think we can. Uh, One thing you say in there, the power of non-thinking about talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was really a section in which I looked at some of the scientific experiments that surprisingly showed the unconscious mind is capable of solving problems better than the conscious mind under certain conditions. We talked about this deciding about what college you're going to attend, deciding about what partner you're going to marry. The study looked at three apartments, or yeah, I think I'm not sure if it was three or more apartments, but at any rate, they presented them with all of these descriptions of different apartments, location, cost, how nice the landlord was, size, and they asked them to identify the best one. One of them was objectively better, but because there were so many variables, it was impossible for conscious deliberation to figure out which one it was. So they divided them up into three groups. One of them had to make a snap decision immediately after reading the descriptions. They didn't do very well. They chose the preferable apartment at a rate no greater than chance. It was as if they just flipped a coin. Another group, they said, read the description and then take 3 minutes to think about it. Work your way through the problem. Try to figure out which one is the best. Same thing. They were no more likely to choose the desirable apartment than chance. The third group, they let them read the description and then they distracted their conscious minds. They made them work on word problems. And as we mentioned, conscious mind can only do one thing at a time. So they couldn't think about the apartments while they were working on the word problems. And then they said, hey, which one of these is better? They said, that one. I just have a feeling it's that one. And they did better than chance. So sometimes trying to grind our way through a problem is not the best way to do it. And we instinctively know this. When we are faced with a very difficult decision, very complicated, that's going to have huge ramifications, what we say is, let me sleep on it. Mm-hmm. I need some time to not think about this problem. Yeah. And a lot of times we wake up in the morning and we have a gut feeling, really sometimes a certainty, and we can't say why, but we know it's the right decision and it's worthwhile. The unconscious is not always going to be right, but it's going to be right more often than the conscious mind when faced with one of these high variable, high complexity problems.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, another example is that, how sometimes we can't think of somebody's name or name of a song, and we just try and think and we can't do it. And then we just, okay, forget about it. And then a couple of hours later, all of a sudden it just pops in your mind, right?
That's right. Sometimes you need to trust. Yeah. A lot of what I write about in the book is the need to trust this invisible partner. Yeah. Stop thinking about it. Let it come.
Yeah. Well, and the power of non-thinking, that's what meditation's all about, is just to quiet your mind from all the distractions. And then I think that's really what it is. Then you're actually tapping into your subconscious mind,
Yeah, that's right.
That's so cool. Another thing that just occurred to me, what this is so good, and I really appreciate your work. For me, I'm really, I'm kind of, I'm into the spiritual aspect of things, and I studied a lot of spirituality. And you're from the science. See, again, it's just coming together. The same thing. What you're saying
It's
from
funny
science.
how we meet in the middle. Yeah.
Exactly. It's so
Yeah.
good. That's so cool. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Okay, so well, I think maybe now let's talk a little bit about what are some ways. Well, first of all, how about telling people again, what are some of the advantages of what can they expect when they're learning more to trust their subconscious, but also how to balance your conscious mind with your subconscious mind. How can they do that, and what can they expect to what benefits can they get out of that?
Yeah. So the benefits are enormous. Um, everybody wants more mental energy, and
Hmm.
there are all kinds of supplements on the market that claim to give you more energy.
Hmm.
They don't give you anything dramatic. At best,
Yeah.
it's a little bit. Where does mental energy really come from? Well, it comes from the unconscious.
Hmm.
If you're passionate about something, you have oodles of energy, and it's your unconscious mind that decides if you're going to be passionate about something or not. Um, the flow state.
Hmm.
That's a wonderful state to be in, isn't it?
Hmm.
We're performing at our very best, and we do an enormous amount of work. And how much effort does it take to work in the flow state?
Does it?
Zero,
Yeah.
none. It's our unconscious mind doing our work for us. There's this fairy tale called The Golden Bird, in which this young prince is trying to get this golden bird, and he meets a talking fox along the way. And the
I,
fox gives him advice, and the fox's advice makes absolutely no sense. And so the boy does the rational thing, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Finally, he's given this task that's absolutely impossible. There's a mountain blocking the king's view. King says, take that mountain down in 7 days or you'll be killed. He can't do it. Fox comes, and the fox goes, listen, I've been giving you good advice. You haven't been following any of it. Just go to bed. I'll take care of the mountain. Wakes up, the mountain is gone. Sometimes our unconscious will just do our work for us. And
mhm.
the work it does is far better than anything we'd be capable of. And I think the flow state is an example of that. What we produce in the flow state is so amazing, and it's effortless.
Yeah, I think it's a wise thing when we find ourselves struggling with something, we need to let go of the struggle and then just chill out on it and then we'll probably get the just like you said in that example, we'll resolve it by not by struggling against it,
Yeah.
by just allowing it to come to us.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do we do that? Well,
Yeah.
did
How do
you
we do that? That's it. That's the
uh
question.
remember The Odd Couple, the old movie, TV
Hmm.
show? Yeah.
Hmm.
That's a situation we're in. Um, we are Felix Unger, and our unconscious is Oscar Madison.
Okay.
And I think that's where it came from. Maybe the writers didn't realize that they were doing that, but they were writing a story about the rational conscious trying to come to terms with the irrational,
Mm.
bestial unconscious.
Yeah. That's
Um,
what.
yeah, and so how do you make friends with somebody? Well, the most powerful thing you can do to make friends with somebody is to listen to them.
Mhm.
And that's where we need to start with our unconscious. We need to listen to what it's saying, and we need to recognize that it is an entity that in many ways is independent of the ego. It's part of our brain, but it's not part of the ego. It's separate from the I that we live with. And so we need to pay attention to our emotions. What are they trying to tell us? We need to pay attention to spontaneous thoughts that come into our head. A lot of times, spontaneous thoughts are negative. We talked about how the unconscious is neither good nor bad, it is both to the max. When we get these negative thoughts, most of the time, what we do is we push them out of our minds, because we think, geez, I'm better than that. That's ugly. Sometimes we need to do that because sometimes what comes from the unconscious is more than the conscious mind can handle. But if we can handle it, we should not push it away.
Mm-hmm.
We should allow it to occupy our minds. We shouldn't act on it, but we should allow it to occupy our minds. That's the conscious mind opening the door and saying to the unconscious, we may not agree about everything, but you are welcome here. You will be accepted. I'm not always going to do what you want, but I will listen to you and I will take it into account. So I think that paying attention to emotions and thoughts, especially when they're negative and we're tempted to push them away, is something that's very, very powerful. And even though it may be distasteful, even painful, it will lead to wonderful things.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really just about being awake, being aware and
Yes.
listening. Yeah.
Yes. And when you use the word awake, I think a lot of people think of meditation.
All right.
Meditation is about increasing awareness, and that is a very wonderful, powerful tool. One of the things that meditation does, it increases ego strength, right? We sit down and we form an intention to focus on our breath. And within about 1 second, our mind wanders. At least that's my experience. And so what we do is we very gently bring it back. That is an exercise in ego strength.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I talk about in the book is how meditation in some ways has things in common with ancient initiation ceremonies.
Mm.
Ancient initiation ceremonies were about the conscious mind showing that it can act autonomously. So people would not eat food for days at a time, resisting hunger. They would not sleep, resisting the urge to sleep. They would voluntarily put themselves in situations of physical pain. Now, these were dramatic, heroic acts that would strengthen the will. Meditation is much more gentle and it gets its power through repetition. So you focus on the breath, your mind wanders, and you engage in an act of will. You say, I'm going to bring my attention back to the breath. It's a tiny act of will, but you do it thousands and thousands of times. And this strengthens the ego and prepares it. It makes it better equipped to open up that channel and allow the wild animals of the unconscious to come through so that the ego can tame them and work together with them as a partner.
Wow, that's really well said. So again, that's the science really describing the benefits of meditation. Just tapping into allowing your inner self to come through and listen to it.
Yeah, that's right. It's a scientific explanation, justification for a spiritual practice. Now, not everyone's going to need that. For most people can say, well, great, it's spiritual. I'm going to do that. But I think that in our modern 21st century world, that can be hard for some people. And
Yeah,
having that scientific explanation of, yes, it works on the
absolutely.
spiritual level, but also works on the neuroscientific level.
Yeah.
For me, at any rate, I found that very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful. Well, I really appreciate your work here, and this is such a message that most people really, really need to hear. So let me ask you, when somebody reads your book, what do you hope that what's the main thing that you hope that they get out of reading your book?
I hope that their world becomes more magical. I hope that that veil of the ordinary that covers up the most wonderful aspects of the world is ripped away, and that magic moments become common. That this hidden partner is not working at odds with them, but they're working together so that they are tapping into all of the aspects that their brain has to offer, whether that's doing well on an exam, doing well writing something, playing sports, or just experiencing fulfillment of being with other people. I want their world to become more magical and more fulfilling.
Wow, so well said. Amen. Yeah, that's so good. Well, uh, Daniel, thank you so much. I really appreciate your work, and I think that was so helpful for people. Uh, so tell us, where's the best place for people to get a copy of your book?
It's on Amazon. It's on
Okay.
Barnes and Noble. SpellBound. Look it up, and I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes here or description. Spellbound by Dr. Daniel Lieberman. Well, Daniel, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really appreciate your work, and I think you've made a great contribution. And for me, it's just so exciting too, because, like I say, it's just really bringing science and spirituality together. That's so important, and that's what we need more of in the world.
Well, thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk about my passion and for your
Yeah,
excellent questions. I
yeah.
appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for that. And so I like to always end all of my episodes by saying, I think it's Einstein who said knowledge without action is useless, right?
Yes, that's right.
So we always give you some great new information, some great knowledge, but you got to act on it. You got to step up. So I highly recommend you get a copy of Spellbound, and I think it's going to be life changing for you. So once again, Dr. Daniel Lieberman, thank you so much. That was great.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So go out there and take some action and get a copy of his book. And thank you very much for being here. And if you like this episode, tell your friends, subscribe to our channel, give us a good review, and tell your friends about the Fearless Aging podcast. All right, Daniel, that was great. That was fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Those were wonderful questions. I feel like I
Good.
really got to talk about the things I thought were important.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. That was great. That was really a lot of fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed your book. I really went through it and I had a little outline of all the things I thought that were kind of important that could help. So that was so good. Yeah,
Great,
awesome.
great.
So yeah, we'll definitely promote it all. So I can have this up by tomorrow. I can actually post it up, and I'll send you the audio and the video,
Wonderful. Thank
and
you. That's fast.
I'll promote it. Well, see, I use my platform is called Spreaker. So I just upload this. I have an introduction there. I just upload it, and then they send it out. Yeah, they send it out to all the things, and then
Right.
I'm gonna promote it to my list and to on my YouTube channel, and you can do the same. And hopefully we'll get some action for you. But this is the kind of message that I love to get out to the world. We need more people to step up and realize their potential. And isn't it amazing still? Oh yeah, maybe you'd like to be on there. I have another podcast I'm just starting this year. It's called the Great News Podcast.
Oh,
It's talking about, so many people are doing so many great, amazing things to change the world and to help create peace and solve all these challenges. But you don't hear it on the nightly news, right? All you hear is all the doom and gloom and stuff. So it's no wonder most people are freaked out and fearful and unhappy and stressed out because they think that's just the way it is. It's always going to be bad. But there's way more people doing a lot of good things that you just don't know about. So I'm going to be interviewing a lot of people that are making a positive difference in the world and offering and let people know how they can get involved and to help, because we can create peace and prosperity and all the things that we need here, but we just have to believe that we can and start doing it instead of just saying, oh, that's just the way it is. Well, the way it is because that's what you believe in because you accept it. But if
that's right.
we don't have to. I mean, isn't it amazing? I mean, we could be peaceful and sharing all the knowledge and wealth. It can be such an amazing world. So why do we have to put up with this insane shit that goes on all the time?
You want to know what I think?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think because we have not yet fully gotten control over our evolutionary animal urges.
Yeah, that's true.
The reason why countries want to invade other countries is because of this evolutionary drive to acquire more resources. And so I think that one of the most important ways to make the world a better place is not trying to control the behavior of other people, but to work on ourselves, to try to expand our own consciousness so that we become more human, less subject to our destructive instincts, and better able to spread that message of love.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Is it because it's still based on fear, right? We're not going to get enough for us, so we got to go out and get all just for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Not realizing it could be so much better for everybody if there's no limit. We live in an abundant universe. If we just shared it and cooperated and collaborated, there's plenty for everybody if we just do that, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so exciting. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So if you'd like to come on, if you'd like to be on the Great News Podcast sometime and talk about what some changes that you'd like to see and what things that you're doing to help make that, that'd be great.
That sounds terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll think about some things that might be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, that'd be really fun.
All
Okay.
right. Well, I look forward to getting the link and sharing it with my publisher and with everybody I know.
Yeah, we'll get that off to you. And again, really nice to connect with you. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
It's my pleasure. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.